Hello and welcome to Shades of Love. Ashlee here. If you're new, welcome. If you're not new and you're returning, then welcome back. Regardless of whichever one of those categories you fit in, I'm glad you're here and I hope you're doing well and that you've had a great week or weekend or you have great plans coming up. I'm not sure if I do yet because we don't make plans on my own for some reason. I don't know. I don't know why. Don't ask me. But anyway, just a heads up before I ask you to subscribe and hit the notification bell because I should let you know what you're in for. This is adult content. I do read romance stories that are all written by me. So you may hear like something a little steamy, and you may hear a curse word or something like that, I mean, you will hear it. You will. So, if you're not into that, you can skip through some of them and just stay for the romance. Yeah. But if you are into that, or you're okay with that, or you're 18 and older, or all of the above, then stay tuned. Hit the notification bell after you subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you like what you're seeing, like what you hear. Did you know that otters sleep while they hold hands? They hold hands while they sleep so that way they don't drift away from each other. Isn't that a sweet fun fact? Anyway, stay tuned because the next chapter is on the way. Chapter 8 of School's Out by me, Miss Thomas. She was exhausted after a long day in the classroom, then a certification training following the school day, so she was thrilled to see that her husband was already home with dinner for them by the time she got there. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" she asked him when she entered the room, saw that the dining room had already been set, waiting. Chapter 8 of School's Out by me, Miss Thomas. She was exhausted after a long day in the classroom, followed by a certification training that day. So she was thrilled to see that her husband was already home with dinner for them by the time she got there. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" she asked him when she entered the dining room and saw that the table was set and waiting. He stood up and pulled her chair out for her to sit down. "Not since you've been home," he answered lightly, placing a kiss on her cheek as he pushed her chair in for her. "And I love you too." "Thank you for picking up dinner. I'm exhausted and in no mood to cook." "Long day?" he asked her, taking a bite of the Chinese that he brought home with him. He always found little ways to spoil her, even if it was bringing home her favorite takeout. "You could say that again. I had a certification course to attend after school today, and because of the late meeting at work, I was 10 minutes late for that. Then traffic was backed up on the way home because of some accident. I hope everyone's okay." She took a bite of food, and after swallowing, she said, "But I'm here now with you, so at least my evening isn't as terrible as my day was." He laughed. Let me get back. Chapter 8 of School's Out by me, Miss Thomas. She was exhausted after a long day in the classroom, then a certification training following the school day, so she was thrilled to see that her husband was already home with dinner by the time she got there. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" she asked him when she entered the dining room and saw that the table was set and he was waiting there when she walked in. He stood up and pulled out her chair. "Well, not since you've been home, honey," he said, and he kissed her cheek lightly, pushed her chair in. "And I love you too." "Thank you for picking up dinner. I'm exhausted and in no room to cook." "Long day?" he asked her, taking a bite of the Chinese that he brought home with him. He always found little ways to spoil her, even if it was bringing home her favorite takeout. "You could say that again. I had a certification course to attend after school today, and because of a late meeting at work, I was 10 minutes late for that. Then there was a traffic accident, and it was backed up for miles. But I'm here now with you, so at least my evening isn't as terrible as my day was. He laughed. Sorry to hear about your day, darling. Then, with a serious expression, he asked, what can I do to make it better? That was one of the many things she loved about this gorgeous man. He was always looking for ways to make her happy, to help her feel better when she was down. She set her fork and placed her hands on the table, palms down, looking at him, and answered, I'm sure you could come up with a few ideas. You are confident about that, are you? I'm always confident when you're around, she said with a low voice, a seductive voice. Now come over here and show me one way that you can make everything better for me. His lips twitched. She could see that he was trying hard not to smile as he stood up and made his way over to her. She slid her chair back to make room for her and him at the table. He stopped just inches in front of her, widened his stance, and placed his hands on his hips. She had to resist the urge to fan her face. He looked so fucking hot standing there like that. It reminded her of the first time she'd ever seen him. He was waiting for a cab, and when one finally stopped for him, someone hopped in front on the other side. He was left at the curb and was standing in the same pose, hands on his hips. She couldn't help but laugh when she saw him, even though he was one of the hottest men she'd ever seen. She offered to share her cab with him, and he offered to buy her a drink as a thank you, and one thing led to another, and here they were 7 years later. She looked up at him, humor and lust reflected in his gaze, and asked, well, what are you waiting for? Good question. He got down on his knees before her and spread her legs. I can smell your sweetness, my dear. Oh, can you? Why don't you taste it then? She tempted him, sliding her ass to the edge of the seat and hiking up her skirt. Thanks to Mr. Cooper, she was without panties, so her sex was fully exposed. Delicious looking. And bare for me, I see, her husband said, licking his lips and leaning in to inhale her scent. His fingers found their way up her thighs and to that sweet spot between her thighs. She was damp from her arousal, and he loved it, if the growl that he released was evidence. You're driving me crazy, she breathed out in a low moan when his fingers began probing her folds, seeking entrance into her wet sex. His fingers pressed inside, sliding in smoothly, guided by her slickness. He curved his fingers upward and began massaging her G-spot, swollen and sensitized. Oh, God, she moaned, again, unable to hold back the sound from pleasure. Before her climax hit, she stopped him. Pants down, she ordered. She wanted to please him and give him pleasure before they joined. He quickly stood up and removed his slacks and boxer briefs, his erection springing forward, stiff, thick, throbbing. Mr. Cooper was long, but her husband was thick. She teased him at first, licking the sack beneath him, sliding her tongue up the shaft to the tip. He was oozing, and she loved it. The taste was salty, tangy, and musky. It was the perfect combination, and it screamed male. Once she had licked the moisture from him, and she took him into her mouth as deep as she could. Her jaw ached from the width, but she relished the mild pain, knowing that it was only a prelude to ecstasy. She moved her head back and forth, gliding her lips along the length and the girth of his member, stimulating him and causing him to harden even more than he already was. His lips pushed forward, pressing him in further to her mouth, almost gagging her, and she loved it. When she felt the throbbing increase and his member began to twitch, she pulled away. If he was going to spill himself, it was going to be inside of her. She stood up and bent over the table, exposing her ass to his view, and told him, I need you now. Fuck me. He chuckled, but obeyed. Moving behind her, he wasted no time in thrusting into her slickness. Hard and fast, he punished her more than pleasured her, and then it became a painful pleasure. More than he ever had before. She screamed out his name over and over, positive that the neighbors would hear them. She couldn't help it. He wasn't making love to her like he usually did. Oh no, he was fucking her, and it felt so damn good. He grunted with each pump of his hips, his legs slapping against the back of her thighs every time their bodies came into contact. He was rough with her in a way that he had never been before, and it was driving her crazy, intensifying this animalistic session that they were having. His hand went to her back and pushed her into the tabletop. Her breasts were tender and plump, pressed between her and the table, sending electric sensations shooting through her body. It was heaven. Fuck. I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna come. She yelled at her orgasm as it washed over her. He pressed one finger into her puckered, forbidden hole, another first. The foreign touch only acted as a trigger for another, more intense orgasm. When the second one hit her, her husband's climax followed with his one final thrust. She felt the warm semen fill her, combining with hers. They rocked together as they rode the waves of pleasure together. She felt more connected with him at that moment than she ever had before. When their orgasms settled, they collapsed onto the table, still breathing heavily from the exertion. After a few minutes lying there, her husband whispered into her ear, "I think our dinner is getting cold." She laughed and agreed. She wasn't hungry anymore. Well, not for that anyway. "How about we head upstairs for dessert? Dinner's overrated anyhow," she suggested. "One of the best ideas I've heard in a long time," he agreed. And ignoring the mess on the table, she led him upstairs to their bedroom for round 2 and round 3. Thank you for watching. For more videos like this, please like, subscribe, give a thumbs up. Hit the notification bell so you're notified when I upload the next chapter. And remember, today was just one chapter of your story.